to a grand jury. All 23 of us immediately refused to testify to that grand jury that was meeting in that building right there. We refused to testify because we said we would not inform on our movement. We refused to testify because we said that nothing that we are doing is wrong. Protesting war and occupation, supporting the self-determination of the Palestinian and Colombian and Filipino and other people around the world who are battling against U.S. war and occupation is not a crime. But for a year and a half, the investigators in that building have been going after us. Right across the street. And we know that there's been a recent escalation in that case, 2 recent escalations. The one that we're here for to support Carlos Montes in Los Angeles, and the other one, which is the reason we chose this plaza on this day, is that Barry Jonas, a wicked ideologue in the U.S. Attorney's Office, who is historically anti-Arab and anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian, was sent specifically to Chicago by the U.S. Attorney to lead this investigation. So we know that they're escalating that investigation against us, but we will continue to resist that grand jury, and we will continue to resist the criminalization of our work and our movements here in the United States. And what we're here for specifically today is to resist these phony charges against my brother, my mentor, Carlos Montes. For those that don't know him, he is a co-founder of the Brown Berets, the Chicano Liberation Organization in Southwest United States when he was in LA. He is a leader in the education rights community across the country. He is a leader in the immigrant rights community across the country, and he is one of the foremost leaders of the Chicano Liberation Movement. They are attacking him. They arrested him under the pretext of phony gun charges, but we know why they went after him. They went after him because, like the 23 of us who have been subpoenaed, he helped organize the protest against the Republican National Convention in 2008. They're after him because of his organizing work. He organized thousands and thousands of Chicanos and others in Los Angeles for social justice every single day of his life. They're attacking him because of his ideas and because of his beliefs, foremost among them that the Palestinian people have the right to self-determination and an independent state free of occupation and colonialism. And he says the same about the people in Colombia, who have the right to freedom and not to be attacked by U.S.'s Plan Colombia, which pumps billions of dollars to the government of Colombia to repress the peasants and the labor unionists there. That's who Carlos Montes is. And in LA over the last year, the LA Sheriff's Department and the FBI, make no mistake about it, the LA Sheriff's Department themselves admitted that it was an FBI operation when they raided Carlos's home and arrested him at 5 in the morning. It was an FBI-led investigation and an FBI-led operation. So that's why we know for sure that he's being attacked for his political work, for his political activism, for his anti-war activism, and because he's going to be here this weekend and one of the speakers at the NATO protest on Sunday.
Hell yeah.
All of us need to be there to support him and to hear what he has to say and to continue to demand of Barry Jonas and the LA Sheriff to drop all charges against Carlos Montes.
Right.
Yep.
He's a leader of all of us. He's a leader in our movement, and we must continue to support him the way we supported leaders in the Black Liberation Movement and the American Indian Movement and the environmental rights movements and the women's rights movements and all of the other movements that have been historically repressed by that building right there, by the FBI and by the Department of Justice. Thank you all for being here today in this picket. We're going to have a couple people that are going to speak. The first person is a close friend of mine as well. We are bound by a lot of things. One of them is that her home was also raided in September of 2010. She's visiting us this week and organizing. She actually organized this picket and is organizing against NATO and or helping us organize a protest on Sunday, Jess Sundin.
Well, it's kind of crazy to be by this building that has been such a big part of my life since September 24th of 2010. But I want to talk about Carlos Montes. Carlos, got to spend last week with Carlos as he was preparing to go to trial. And in East LA, Carlos is a hero. Everywhere you go, people call him brother. They want to hug him, they want to be close to him, and they wish him the best. More than 100 people turned out for his trial in Los Angeles yesterday. Among them were not just peace activists and anti-war activists. It wasn't just Chicanos and immigrants' rights activists. The labor movement was there. The faith community was there. Parents groups and teachers unions. The street vendors. Across the city of Los Angeles, Carlos is a hero, and he's a hero of mine as well. And it's shameful what the government is trying to do to him. When we talk about coming to Chicago to protest NATO and their war and poverty agenda, does any of us believe that that act alone should make us criminals? No, it shouldn't. And it shouldn't for Carlos either. He not only has risen to the task of trying to transform this world, to challenge the wars that are carried out for greed across the world, but to transform his own community, to fight for justice and liberation, and to defend the rights of others to do just that. The charges against Carlos, from start to finish, are bogus. First of all, they're based on an old protest from before when I was born. In 1969, organizing in East LA around the issue of education and the terrible conditions in the high schools and colleges attended by Chicano students. He organized the walkouts that happened in East LA that transformed the movement for Chicano rights. Well, really, they gave birth to the movement for Chicano rights in this country. At one of those protests, police, much like the ones we see around us right now and we'll be seeing more of this week, attacked the demonstration. And coming out of that, after he went home from the protest, he was pulled over in his car and he was arrested. They claimed that he had thrown an empty pop can, or if they said an empty pop can, they hit a police officer in the arm. They charged him with a felony, and he went to court. In the end, Carlos did not spend a day in prison. He didn't. He was on probation, and he paid a fine. And in California law, that makes it not a felony, but a misdemeanor. If you have a felony in California, you spend a year in prison. That's how it is. Carlos never did. It's absolutely untrue that Carlos has a felony dating from that protest. First of all, he never should have been arrested anyway. Students had the right to defend themselves when police attacked that demonstration, and it's thanks to protesters that day and others like it that there is a Chicano Studies program in not only in East LA but in colleges around the country. They transformed higher education that day, but Carlos ended up with a record. And now the FBI dusted off the old files because there weren't computers back then. And they're claiming that that old empty pop can means that today, Carlos should be denied the rights that other felons are also denied. And so they found out that he had gone to a local gun shop and legally purchased a firearm. This is, when he tells the story, he often talks about how shortly before he purchased this firearm, he was the victim of a home invasion, an armed robbery in his own home. And in response to that, he bought a gun, as many Americans before and since have done. And he passed the background check and the store gave him the gun. And then it's years later that the FBI calls up the sheriff and says, hey, that guy's got a felony. You made a mistake. And at 5 in the morning, they busted his door to smithereens. I saw it. It's like splinters. There's nothing left of it. With the battering ram, the flashlights in his eyes, their guns drawn, and carried him off to jail in his pajamas. He got out on bail, and he began building a movement for his own defense. It's important for me to say that before that morning, Carlos was leading the defense of people like me and Hatem in Los Angeles. They had organized demonstrations to support us time and again. And so when I found out, actually I was at a press conference about our case, when I learned that Carlos had been raided, I was shocked and angered. And then here we are today, a year after that raid. It's been a year now, and they're really bringing these charges forward. So yesterday, Carlos went to the first day of his trial. Like I said, about 100 people came down there with him. And I'm going to do my best to sort of report on what happened there. We, as I said, believe there never was a felony, and that's the crux of our defense. That and the fact that this is a political prosecution, and the charges should be thrown out because they're discriminatory on that basis alone. But also, there's no felony. So we got into court and we made a motion saying we don't want to. We think these should be thrown out. The judge had to consider this in the pre-trial efforts and had denied our motions before this. But there's some new evidence, and the judge that we had yesterday, which was a new judge, postponed the continuation of the trial, so there will be time to hear this new evidence that we hope will result in the charges being thrown out. That said, because this is a political trial, none of us believes, least of all Carlos, that we can count on the legal system to guarantee his freedom. It's on you and me. And Carlos is going to be here on Sunday, and I hope that when he is here, he receives the warmest reception that Chicago has ever given. I know that you're going to love him when you meet him. He's going to give an awesome speech, but he's also going to march with us on NATO. And so I want to ask you to do two things after today to continue to do the work to demand that the charges against Carlos be dropped. The first is call that district attorney, Steve Cooley, and tell him what you think. Tell him where you're calling from, and tell him to drop the charges. If you don't have his number, it just means you didn't get one of the flyers. I'll get you one before you leave. Just find me. But he needs to hear from you. And if you already called him, call him again. Call him every day. They open at 8 o'clock, and that's LA time, so that's, long after most of us are up, right? Call him and tell him to drop the charges, and that we are going to stand by our movement's leaders. The other thing I'd like to invite you to do is to march with Carlos on Saturday, to march on NATO, to continue building a movement like the one that Carlos has always been a part of, to demand an end to wars, to demand an end to poverty, and to demand justice, not only for Carlos Montes, but for all of us. So glad to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Jess. Free Carlos Montes, drop the charges now.
Free Carlos Montes, drop the charges now.
Free Carlos Montes, drop the charges now. Jess mentioned the contingent, and it's going to be a very, very exciting contingent. Not only the Committee to Stop FBI Repression with a huge banner that says opposing war is not a crime, and other banners that talk about Carlos specifically, but the United States Palestinian Community Network is organizing Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims across Chicago and the country to march behind a 50-foot long flag in that contingent. Bayan USA, an organization of Filipinos across the country, will be in that contingent as well and the National Boricua Human Rights Network, who have their own political prisoners, one of whom has been in a U.S. prison for 31 years for organizing for the independence of Puerto Rico. It's going to be an exciting contingent. We want you to join us. Carlos will be marching with us in that contingent, and we hope you could all join us on Sunday at noon in Grant Park. The next person I want to bring up is a young man who came to Chicago a couple years ago and has been organizing in the Arab and Palestinian community ever since. He's an activist from the University of Wisconsin, a student activist who's learning that community activism is a little bit different. He's doing fantastic work with us, and he's met Carlos and had an opportunity to talk to him, and he wants to say a few words on behalf of the Arab and Palestinian community. Muhammad Sankari.
We stand here in front of the U.S. Federal Building in solidarity with our brother and mentor, Carlos Montes. Here at the doorstep of Patrick Fitzgerald and Barry Jonas, men who have made their careers by attacking and repressing Arab and Muslim communities across the United States. Those men who have locked up our community leaders for providing backpacks and shoes for Palestinian orphans. These men who are part of the same institution that for a century has repressed the progressive movement in this country. These men who believe that they have claimed power through assassinations, infiltrations, and imprisonment of our leaders. But we're here to say that they're wrong, because we have the power. We have the power in people like Carlos, who have dedicated their whole lives to the pursuit of social justice. He showed us power with the LA walkouts, the Chicano moratorium, and the Brown Berets. They showed us the power of the Chicano nation. And on the 64th anniversary of the ethnic cleansing of their ancestors, over 2,000 Palestinian prisoners showed us power as they struck a blow to the Israeli occupation, declaring death or dignity in their hunger strike, achieving their demands after fasting, some for over 75 days. They showed us the power and the steadfastness of the Palestinian nation. We also see power from our brother Oscar Lopez, who taught us that for those who struggle, victory is our reward. Just as all the other elders, such as Carlos Alberto Torres and Lolita Lebron. And the list goes on and on. For all those who showed us true power, Elaine Brown, Asada Shakur, Yuri Kuchiyama, Richard Aokai, the Chicanas of 18th Street, and more and more and more. All those giving voices to those who languish in prisons, from Bagram to Guantanamo, from secret CIA rendition sites to the CMU units across the United States. And that brings me back to Carlos, who, facing an attack by the FBI, is undeterred, deciding instead on traveling to Chicago to join us marching on NATO. And he'll join us under the banners "Opposing War is Not a Crime," and next to the 50-foot Palestinian flag, marching next to our allies from the Puerto Rican and Filipino communities. And as we march from Grant Park to the doors of McCormick Plaza, housing the warmongers, they'll surely pause and revel in our power. One not made of bombs and bullets, but one enshrined by tens of thousands of people, marching in the spirit of those who came before us and chanting in unison, "Opposing war is not a crime! Opposing war is not a crime! Opposing war is not a crime! Free Carlos Montes!" Thank you.
Free Carlos Montes!
Free Carlos Montes!
Free Carlos Montes!
Free Carlos Montes!
Free Carlos Montes! Drop the charges now!
Free Carlos Montes!
Drop the charges now!
Drop the charges now!
We have, as Muhammad mentioned, with the Chicanas of 18th Street, he's talking about, for those that are not from Chicago, he's talking about our 18th Street here in Chicago, where there is and always has been a vibrant Mexican, Chicano, Latino community. One of those people is here with us today, somebody who has been since September 24th, 2010, has been at the forefront of the defense work in defense of the 23 of us. And since May of 2011, when Carlos's door was busted down and he was arrested, she has been in the forefront in Chicago of the defense work in support of Carlos Montes. She's another mentor of mine and a mentor of a number of Chicanos and Latinos in this city. Please welcome Magda Castaneda.
Que se oiga, mi nombre es Magda, lo digo en español porque quiero que sepan que no estamos separados.